John. With a glowing introduction like that, I can hardly wait to hear what I'm going to say, actually, but there we go. So, yeah, those of you who know me know that I've spent a lot of my career in FTSE 100s, spent 15 years on the boards of FTSE 100 companies in executive capacity. I did Burberry's global transformation program for Angela Arendts, which the best part of which was a 50% VIP discount card. And as I've got 4 daughters and a wife, I was extremely popular. I finished my corporate career in Smiths Group, the engineering conglomerate. I ran Smiths Detection, which is the company that makes the scanners that you put your luggage through when eventually we get to go back on aeroplanes. And I was finally the chief commercial officer there, where I had responsibility for sales, marketing, quality, innovation, and strangely also for the group's operations in China, as well as the commercial operations globally. So I went independent about 5-6 years ago and opened our house up, which is a picture which is in the background, as a beauty and wellness centre. That's closed right now, but my wife and I still live here. But it'll be opening up, hopefully, please God, at the beginning of July again. And the rest of my time I spend doing business advisory work, as well as the work for the Chamber. I'm also chairman of Law Research. But I really wanted to talk to you about leadership today. I'm going to try and share the screen. I'm a complete idiot when it comes to this stuff, so I may need rescuing by Christian at some point, but I don't know. Can everybody see the screen? Can you see it?
We're all on. That's Brian. That's good.
Okay,
yep,
brilliant.
That's good.
Okay, so really, this is very much a personal perspective. I need to find how to go backwards now because I've gone too far. On leadership, and people say I put together about 5 or 6 years ago a framework which was really meant to be a really approachable and easy tool for leaders to use, just to sort of self-check and just say, you know, am I doing the kinds of things that make me a good or better leader? And I would say it doesn't matter if you're an introvert or you're an extrovert. I mean, the old nonsense about leaders all being some sort of messianic characters with larger than life personalities is complete rubbish. I've seen leaders who are actually really very introverted but extremely effective. So we can all get better. So this isn't me telling you what to do. This is just simply sharing a perspective and putting in your hands a practical framework which you'll be able to use, hopefully, if you like it, just to, as I said, self-check on a fairly regular basis that you're doing the kinds of things that are going to make you a better leader. And obviously with COVID-19, the requirement for good leadership is acute, absolutely acute. And it's very personal. The teams that work for us, they're looking to us continually, that their livelihoods, their concerns, they want to know that we are still worth following. I think that's the key. So all of the things I'm going to share with you are applicable post-COVID, but they're particularly relevant now. So the framework, the tool that I'm going to share with you in a moment, I first put together in January of 2015 for the Smiths Global Sales Academy, and subsequently I got lots of invitations to go and share it and thoughts on leadership all over the world, which was extremely flattering because basically from my perspective this was pretty ordinary, and I think perhaps it's the ordinariness that people have liked because it's quite simple. And a highlight of that was about getting on for 2 years later, I got invited to Harvard Business School to speak on leadership at an alumni event and to share the framework there, which is, you know, I was gobsmacked, incredibly flattering. So let's just focus on a couple of things. I said it was a personal perspective. I like Peter Drucker. I like a lot of what he's had to say over the years. And he differentiates quite clearly between management and leadership. He talks about management as doing the right things, but management is doing things right, and leadership is doing the right things. Get it right, Brian. And clearly what we want as leaders is to be good managers as well. And if we're good managers, we want to be good leaders. Ideally, if you can get the combination, that's ideal. But the thing that for me really differentiates leadership and management is that if you're managing people and tasks, they kind of have to do what you say. Whereas leadership is something that is actually based on fellowship. It's the individual's choice to be led by you. You can't make them follow you. You can make them obey you. You can make them take your direction, but they decide whether they're going to be actually led by you. And there's a terrific book by a friend of mine, Gareth Jones, No Family Relationship, and Rob Goffey, that got published in Harvard Business Review a few years ago, called Why Should Anyone Be Led by You? And I think there's a couple of great questions that we should always ask ourselves, which is, you know, why would someone want me to lead them? And why do people actually follow you right now? And I think it's also worth in passing just to reference culture, and this is particularly true now. If we have been attentive to building a creative and positive culture in our organizations, right now it's particularly vital. You know, an old chairman of mine called culture the unseen hand. You know, it can either push people back in terms of performance, or it can push them forwards. And Professor Francis Fry at Harvard refers to culture as being what our people do when we're not there, which I think is a great definition. Right now, for a lot of our staff, we're not there physically. So we are relying on them, and we're relying on that drive from culture to drive performance. And there's a real commercial outcome of all of this, which is that productivity, creativity, high performance, they are all a consequence of people wanting to follow. And, you know, we've all heard of the old press gang days where people were pressed into service in the Royal Navy. And the saying that one volunteer is worth 10 pressmen is really applicable here, because the highest performance in any organization is always, in my experience, achieved when people actually want to be in it, and they want to contribute meaningfully to its success, and they want to do the best they can for their leaders. So creating fellowship actually has amazing commercial outcomes. And I'm sure this is resonating with you, because I'm sure you've got people following you that you never have to worry about, because you know that they are just simply in it for you and for the good of the organization, and they will perform. And you've got others where, you know, there isn't quite that same connection. They're being directed, but they're not actually, you know, voluntarily going that extra mile and raising their performance. So I said there was a framework to share, so I'm going to get onto that. As you can see, it's completely blank. It's got 9 elements, each supported by a question. So if you think about it as 3 rows, the top row I'm going to share with you is all about you. The second row is all about the task. And the third row is all about talent. And if we can get all these things in balance, I believe that makes us particularly effective leaders. So let's talk about the top row first. And clearly, our values are crucial to inspiring fellowship. And the first sort of self-check question that I suggest that we ask ourselves with regard to our values is simply this: what do we stand for? And is it evident? You know, is what we stand for clear to the people who we're attempting to lead? You know, if you are, it doesn't mean you've got to be pink and fluffy. We haven't all got to be the same. Some leaders are warmer, some leaders are much more commercially hard-edged, for example. But as long as it's clear and people know what you stand for, they're much more likely to follow you. And the way they know what you stand for is always demonstrated by your behaviors. So I think the question we have to ask ourselves with regard to behaviors is, how do we enact our values? And for me, this is leadership, I guess, trap 101. If you pause for thought for just a moment, you will probably remember leaders whose behaviors have been different from what they have said their values were. I remember being in an organization where we were trying to drive up innovation, and the chief executive was extremely keen on this and wanted people to experiment, to take risks, innovating as a technology company, and then if they spent some money and failed, he'd beat them up. So it was completely inconsistent. I've seen another chief executive in a similar industry who very successfully created a culture of innovation because he celebrated failure. And you know, he said, you know, that's just one more thing we've learned when we fail. You know, clearly you don't want to be failing too expensively or over too long a period, but you get the point. So those values and behaviors have to be consistent. And then the last part of it is engagement. You can't lead from an ivory tower, and that's particularly challenging, I think, for us at the moment, because we can't just that easily in many of our current situations walk the corridors. We can't actually take that time out to have a cup of coffee with an employee or a team member. But we can stay engaged using these technology platforms. And again, many thanks to Emerson and Christian for consistently making this possible for us week by week. So the engagement is all contextualized by our relationship with people. So that's the top row. And so you'll be able to get this afterwards, and you can print it out on a single piece of paper and just ask yourself, what do I stand for? Is it nice and clear? Are my behaviors consistent with my values? How do I enact my values? And basically it all comes true in how I relate to people. And you've heard a lot, we've all heard a lot about authenticity in leadership. Unless those three things line up, people aren't going to see you as authentic. And what happens? People won't follow you. They just won't. Or if they do, and then they catch you out in those with a lack of consistency in that top row, they'll stop following you. And you won't always realize it straight away. You may find that people just seem a bit different. Maybe they're not as engaged with the business. And it's really important to acknowledge that and to find out why. And it doesn't mean you've got to be perfect all the time. It doesn't mean any of us has got to be perfect all the time. And there's going to be times when our behaviors are inconsistent with our values, but we're always putting it in the bank to make sure that we're building up that positive goodwill, so that when we do get it wrong, as long as we apologize, as long as we acknowledge our mistakes and put our hands up, we're much more likely to inspire continued fellowship. So the next row is about the task. And a good leader is someone who can really articulate goals very clearly. And again, I'd urge all of us to be thinking about our businesses and organizations right now with fresh eyes. I'm sure you are. I'm sure you're thinking about, you know, do I need to pivot? Do I need to go in a different direction? Do I need, you know, at the very least, to acknowledge that the way people will be working will be different? some of that enforced by government guidelines, but some of it afterwards will be very much up to us. But just take a minute. Are you properly articulating those goals in a manner that your employees and other team members are actually going to understand? And also, when you're setting those goals, what are the choices that you're going to make around who you allocate aspects of delivery to? Because if you go to the same people all the time, are you at risk of overloading them? If you don't give people enough to do, are they going to go stale and lose motivation, so that followership reduces? And of course, at the heart of everything is that communication. And it's no accident, as I've said in the title of the slide, that communication's right in the center of the grid. And I remember, hearing, and I can't even remember who said it, somebody, when I first started getting involved in business change activity, somebody saying to me that communicate, and when you think you have communicated enough, communicate some more. And this is one area where nature really does abhor a vacuum. If your employees and your teams really don't know, or they're not in contact with you, they will invent a horrifying future in their imaginations. They will fear the worst, and you'll wonder how on earth they come to some of the conclusions that they come to, but they will. So it's up to you to communicate, and that's the important thing is as well to remember, is that communication is our responsibility as leaders. It's not their responsibility to hear it correctly. And if I could just tell you a little story, I had the privilege a few years ago of being at a lunch where Clive Woodward, the World Cup winning England rugby coach, was present. And he was talking about something that happened in extra time in the World Cup final of 2003. And it was, he was on the pitch, and it was a sort of break in proceedings before the extra time started. And he pulled Jonny Wilkinson, who was our outstanding player in a team of greats, to one side, and he said, "Jonny, the plan is we're going to take the ball. Pat's going to take the ball upfield. Dawson's going to pass it back to you, and you're going to kick a drop goal. Game over." And he said, "Have you got that?" And Jonny said, "Yes, boss." And Clive said, "So what did I just say, Jonny?" And he said, "I don't know, boss." And so he told him again, and he said, "You got that, Jonny?" "Yes, boss." "So what did I just say, Jonny?" "I don't know, boss." And so then he went, "Dawson, come here." And he explained it to Matt Dawson, and Matt Dawson could tell him what he said. But and of course, what happened is the Pack took the ball upfield, the ball came back to Jonny Wilkinson, and he kicked a drop goal that won the World Cup. The point I'm trying to make in a pretty clumsy way is it wasn't Jonny Wilkinson's fault that he didn't understand the message. He was absolutely exhausted, and he was on autopilot. What Clive Woodward did that was so good in leadership terms was make sure that the message landed. And I don't know about you, but there's been so many times in my career where I've thought I've communicated the message clearly to employees, and they've gone off and diligently spent a week working on something and come back to me with something totally wrong, something that was not what I was asking for. The point is, it's not their fault, it was mine. So when you're looking at the task, really make sure you're explaining that mission. And as we come out of this strange twilight world that we've been inhabiting, admittedly in quite a lot of glorious sunshine, we have to explain the mission really, really well to our teams. Otherwise, how do they follow? And then, of course, the toughest one is how you as a leader drive execution. It's a potential minefield. Jack Welch, the famous former CEO of GE, said that giving people false feedback, in other words, telling them they were good when they weren't, was the cruelest thing you could ever do. And it's particularly difficult for those of us with independent businesses, isn't it? Because we develop a personal relationship with our teams, and that makes it pretty difficult to land feedback messages that are meant to be redirective. But it's so important that we're strong and clear and manage performance positively and constructively, but very, very clearly. Back to communication again. And because people know, I mean, that, if your performance is off, and they do too. And the ones who are really lacking in self-awareness, who think they are a lot better than they think they are, you need to help them and make them understand, because it's not going to bode well for them in the future. So that's managing the task. It's all about consistency, and it's where that top row of values, behaviors, and engagement really get tested. So you can see it's just building up into a simple one-page grid, this. And then the fun bit, talent. And boy, do we need to hang on to the best talent now. And actually, the competition for talent, even though sadly we know unemployment is going to rise, that competition for talent now is still going to be raging. It's going to be acute. So first of all, we have to be thinking about how we attract talent. And a friend of mine who's a HR director said to me that people join people and they leave companies. I don't know if that's right, really, but I think he probably is. That it's actually, you can probably think of many organizations over the years that you've joined, or people who've joined your organization because they wanted to follow you. And this is, again, the power of leadership. You not manage them, you're leading them, you're inspiring them. So how do you inspire people to join you? Just think about that when you go away from this call today. What is it that that you do? Is it how you paint the picture? Is it the cause that you're championing, and so on? And of course, you do know, and I don't want to go into this today, but the people who follow you have their own followers, and they will inspire people to follow you a step removed, and that's an amazingly powerful thing. The other thing is how do you develop your people? Do you spend time on that? I think it's beholden on all of us to do that. And I always get sad when I see leaders or people who are purporting to be leaders who get threatened by having good people working for them. It was Steve Jobs who famously said, and I'm sure you're familiar with it, said, we don't employ smart people so we can tell them what to do. We employ smart people to tell us what to do. The same thing's true with people's capability and performance. I'm absolutely delighted that many of the people who've worked for me over the years have gone on to be far more successful in their careers and lives than I have. And I'm just grateful for the fact that they basically carried me at various times in my career. And I think if we can have that kind of non-threatened, non-ego-ish approach to the way we develop people, and are happy enough to give them away when they outgrow us, that's something that will inspire fellowship. Other people will see that, they will follow you because they know that you have their interests at heart. So question there is, how do you help people grow? And finally, you'll be pleased to hear, because I've been rambling on for so long, retaining people, I think the big myth is that it's all about compensation levels. I mean, compensation salary, benefits, things. These are all important, of course, especially at times like these. But really, if we possibly can, we need to make those non-issues. We need to be fair. But really, there's so many other reasons why people will continue to follow you, and retaining your best people right now. And we've had some terrific help from the government in this, in many instances, temporary though it is. Retaining people is the key to our future success. So actually, retention is about loyalty and preserving loyalty. And actually, it seems to me, and I told you as a personal perspective, that the best way to preserve loyalty is to pay attention to what's in the other 8 boxes. So that's your test of fellowship. You know, actually, at the end of the day, are you inspiring fellowship in a way that means that people are attracted to you and to your organization? Are you developing the people when they're with you? And are you retaining people for longer than your competitors, because you create an environment that inspires loyalty? So that's the framework. You're very welcome to use it, do what you like with it, mess about with it if you think it's something that's going to help you. But what I would say is just give it 5 minutes to think about how you would answer those questions as a leader yourself right now.